evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We have a special guest later on. Gareth Kirk, one of our deputy chairmen, is joining us with an issue that he's going to bring to discuss. But we'll bring Gareth on maybe in about half an hour's time or so. We'll see how things go. We've got lots of other things to discuss before then. Let's have a look at the title. What did I put in the title? Two-tier policing, Humza, Yousaf and Elon Musk. Cedars school closes, because sometimes I put things in the title then don't get round to them, which is someone's going to sue me one day. Evening, Kirsty. Fire the comments in. Right, a couple of things, a few short things just to get started. Something that struck me is I hear lots of people saying, everyone gets called far right these days. What a nonsense. Everyone gets called far right doesn't mean anything anymore, which is absolutely true. Of course, the family party is being called far right by the Daily Mail. How utterly ridiculous is that? So you're quite right. But I find what some people are saying basically is, they call everyone far right now. How ridiculous is that? Saying everything's far right, far right. Keir Starmer, though, he's a communist like Stalin. You think, I just hang on a minute here. Just think this through a little bit. Far right, they've devalued the currency. They've applied it to lots of people indiscriminately. Doesn't mean anything anymore. But then sometimes the same people do exactly the same thing to the people they're having to go. So people are, the UK has become a tyranny. Starmer's a dictator, and he's like Stalin and is a communist. But they call everyone far right these days. Well, maybe it's time to stop and think about that one. I think with the far right thing as well, some people are saying that everyone gets called that, everyone gets called far right. It's as though that they sort of start to see it as a badge of honor, which I don't think is a good idea at all. But it reminds me as well, a similar thing happened with people being called conspiracy theorists. Because, if you, during the COVID thing, if you had any slightly unorthodox view on anything, people would call you conspiracy theorists. And then, as it turns out, some of the things that were regarded as conspiracy theories did actually turn out to be the official explanation, or there turned out to be good evidence for them. That was a dynamic that went on there. But similarly now, some people adopt the badge conspiracy theorist like a badge of honor, which again, I don't think that's a great move either. Because surely you don't want to be someone in general who believes you're declaring that you believe conspiracy theories. Surely you weigh them up one at a time. Surely that's the sensible thing to do. That's an interesting dynamic going on there. A couple of other short little thoughts as well. I've been thinking about a Muslim situation recently. I've been thinking about things following the riots. And I sort of feel sorry for some Muslim leaders, because when there's a Islamic motivated terrorist attack, people sometimes say, right, the Muslim leaders need to be distancing themselves from it. They need to be condemning it. That would be really helpful if all the Muslim Council of Britain or whoever else, the Imam in Glasgow and Edinburgh or whatever, if they came out and said, we think this is really wrong, this has nothing to do with Islam, this is a really terrible thing. We really wish they'd do that. But on the other hand, I think they often think, well, don't come to us, nothing to do with us. We don't know these people. We just think they're a total embarrassment. So don't come to us expecting us to say something. Why should we have to say something? Because they're nothing to do with us. And I can see that point there. On balance, though, I think maybe I'll come down on the side of, I'd say to Muslim leaders, but I think you should in any case, just to keep reiterating it again and again and again and again. No matter how frustrating you find it to have to keep saying it, I think it probably is a good thing to keep saying. I was also thinking about this as well, about the British. Sometimes people describe the riots as saying it was the English against the Muslims, or the British people against the immigrants or something. Now, obviously, in many cases, using that sort of language is extremely unhelpful, to say the least, because lots of Muslims are British, lots of immigrants are either British citizens or regard themselves as British or whatever. So speaking in that way is really divisive. It's an us and them sort of way of speaking. But the problem with that sometimes, or the difficulty with it, it sort of needs to work both ways. So if someone says it was the English, it was the British people versus the Muslims, I would say, don't say that. You can't say that. That implies the Muslims are not British. That's not right. But then my point's sort of undermined when you see some of the Muslim groups who took to the streets I mean, there were Palestine flag front and center, and if I'm trying to say, these people are British too. It's more difficult to make that case when people's behaviour appears to be they don't want to be seen that way. They don't want to be seen as British. They want to be seen more as Muslim Palestine. That's their identity. So yeah, that was just a little interesting thought there. So that was an interesting question from Mr. and Mrs. 11. Would you consider yourself an abolitionist or an incrementalist? An abolitionist would be the goal. So in other words, just have a legal ban on abortion, except where the life of the mother is in danger. So basically, yeah, an abolitionist, that's what the ideal. In politics, you can't always get everything you want. You don't have enough votes, or you don't have enough influence, or whatever. So maybe incremental steps will be positive. My fear with incremental steps, though, is it can muddy the water. It's like if you, I don't know, thinking off the top of my head. Let's say you've got some country where they're rounding up all the Hindus and executing them. I mean, if they said, okay, let's only execute the male Hindus from now on. How about that? How about we just try and do that? I mean, I think there's a fair case to say that's such an appalling state to get to. Okay, you could argue that it's not quite as bad as where you are now, but it's still so bad, so unconscionable that it's not right to suggest that as an intermediate step. So I've got a lot of time for that. So yeah, in answer to your question, I'm an abolitionist or incrementalist. I would say an abolitionist there, very definitely. It's not a phrase that left the Scottish Family Party. No. We're going to catch up with Niall soon, hopefully. Right. Right. You can finish that comment off in a minute. That would be interesting. So we had the exam results, attainment gap data out again. It's always the headline thing. It's always what the front and center when the exam results come out, that the attainment gap hasn't narrowed or has got wider in some cases. If you're not aware of what that is, basically pupils in schools in wealthier areas perform better in exams than pupils in schools in less well-off areas on average. And the government calls that the attainment gap, and every party in the Scottish Parliament agrees that it needs to be a top priority to narrow the attainment gap, which I think is a fool's errand, because it can't be done, because academic ability is not evenly distributed across income groups. I'll explain that. Let's imagine we started with a blank sheet of paper, totally new society, and you took people and they went to school, they got educated. Who are going to end up the most qualified? The most qualified ones are going to tend to be, not in every case, they're going to tend to be the ones who are more academically able, intelligent, basically. They're going to tend to be the ones who end up with the better qualifications, more advanced qualifications. Then they're all going to get into jobs. Right, which of those people are going to tend to be in the higher paid jobs? Well, the ones with the better qualifications, and also they might be better at the jobs as well, some of these very cognitively demanding jobs, shall we say. So even if you start with a totally level playing field, the more academically able are going to tend to earn more money. I know you're going to be thinking of someone who dropped out of school when they were 15, and they're now 10 times wealthier than all of us put together. Okay, but on average, that's what you'd expect. And then when these people have children, there's a significant inherited component to intelligence. So their children are going to tend to be, in general, a bit more intelligent. Therefore, academic ability is not evenly distributed across income groups or across different areas of Scotland as well. I think that argument is very basic, very straightforward. But the Scottish government and all the other parts in the Parliament, they think they can defy genetics and common sense and whatever and eliminate this attainment gap. But needless to say, they haven't. Now, what they end up doing, the only way you can change it, there's two ways of closing it, really. One way is just let the teachers make the grades up without any standard criteria. That's what they tried during COVID, and that really helps close the attainment gap. So they're pushing for more and more teacher assessment with less and less objective standards. That's one way. The other way of closing the attainment gap is to make all of your qualifications really easy. Just make it so that so anyone can pass. So you don't want a like super high A grades type thing, because then that's really going to sort out them. If you have an exam where you just pass or fail, you can take it as many times as you like. That's like Nat 4, for example. That helps close the attainment gap. So a fundamental conceptual error at the heart of Scottish educational policy that is unchallenged in the Scottish Parliament until we get in. And once we're in, it will be challenged. Right, a few other quick things to mention. Our comment here, right there, Christopher. No issue with someone calling Starmer authoritarian. Absolutely, yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable word. Calling him communist is ignorance or lying. Yeah, actual communists dislike him more than hard right people do. Yes, that's a very perceptive comment. But the thing that's really striking me is just that some people seem totally blind to the double standards. That they complain about what people do to them, but then do the same to other people. I think the online world is totally disconnected from like 95% of the population of the electorate in Scotland. So maybe on X, people throw these pretty extreme terms around, and it seems quite normal. But to the vast majority of the population, they think Keir Starmer a communist. It just sounds silly. I might get plenty of likes and reposts or whatever, but it's not a smart comment. That could be more sensible. You can say things like, in this regard, it's like, you can make comparisons, but they have to be reasonable. Now, isn't it amazing what's going on in America? And there's a lot of attention on American politics at the moment, so I'm just mentioning it from time to time. It's just remarkable that Kamala Harris has gone from being a bit of a liability, a bit of an embarrassment, very unpopular. Then suddenly the Democrats are going to say, oh, she's absolutely brilliant. There's lots of momentum from her campaign. They'll try and get a crowd together and cheer when she's speaking. Okay, that's what the Democrats are going to do. Obviously, that's their job. But the BBC doesn't need to be joining in, and the other media, mainstream media in America. But the BBC reporting is unbelievable. It talks about, Kamala Harris's momentum. As soon as she was appointed or declared or whatever the right term is, they're saying, oh, she's got the momentum and real dynamism in the campaign. But they're not reporting. They're giving hopeful prophecies. They're trying to make self-fulfilling prophecies. And the way they report things about Trump, like his chat with Elon Musk, there's nitpicking, negative. This was unsubstantiated. Total double standards. It's so blatant. It's unbelievable. But the BBC doesn't seem to be able to see it. But another couple of quick topics to mention. Strikes. But with the bin men's strike, and I know bin men's not the right, recycling operatives or whatever the appropriate term is now, their strike's been averted by basically councils giving them more money. I have to say, I do have a problem with the culture of strikes. What it tends to achieve in a country like Scotland is it results in higher pay for public sector workers. If you work for the council or the government, and then a job that's done by lots of people, going on a vital job, going on strikes, a very powerful tool, and it is employed. Now, no one seems to be willing to say this. Employed in the cause of greed, basically. People just want more money. So when, for example, doctors, I don't know, my experience with doctors in Scotland is very professional, very good. But the fact they're very good people doesn't mean that they're immune from just plain and simple greed and wanting more money. Doctors in Britain are very highly paid already, second highest paid in the world, last time I heard. And a big part of the reason for that is unionization and the threat of industrial action, which is a big threat, big political threat to the government. So they managed to, the salaries get pushed up, which I think is a problem. As doctors get paid more and more, of course, that's less money to spend on other things in the NHS, like equipment and facilities for treating patients, for example. Same with the refuse collectors. If they get paid more, that's less money for something else, for other things, for education, whatever. So I think the president of Scotland, the Scottish government, is now priding itself. Well, we averted a strike. We averted another strike. We averted another strike. What they mean is we gave in and gave them more money. But it just sets a precedent. And the general result of this, the net result, is a transfer of funds from workers in the private sector to workers in the public sector. And okay, maybe there are some people that are underpaid, but the market will opposite. What strikes do is they undermine the normal market process that would determine how much you need to pay someone to do a certain job. But when unionization comes in, the threat of industrial action, then that distorts the market, and people end up being paid more than was actually necessary to employ someone to do that job. And the result of that is higher taxes for people in the private sector. And for a lot of people, if you want to get paid more, you have to think, right, how can I work harder? How can I do my job better? How can we make this company more efficient? But for other people, if you want to get paid more, the answer is you go to your union and threaten industrial action. So I'm not too keen on the strike threats from the and to do it in Edinburgh as well during the festival, knowing full well that that's when they've got the council's arm twisted behind their back, and knowing full well that's when it will really impact the businesses of hundreds, thousands of other people across the city. It will really hit them. Hoteliers, restaurateurs, I mean, you name it. Thousands of people across the city, their businesses will be damaged, but the refuse collectors were willing to threaten that for the sake of more money. Now, obviously, unions never say it's more. They always claim it's not more money. There's something else. There's some other issue underlying, but there actually usually isn't. Right, how are we doing? 9:15. Now, one of my things I've built here, two-tier policing. You'll have heard a lot of talk about that. Let's have a comment or two here. Is that why we have a new charge for garden waste collection? Possibly. That's an interesting point. I feel when I pay my garden waste collection £40 a year, is that in some way a sort of tax on families? I mean, what sort of people live in flats with no gardens? Tends to be, single people, people without kids. But if you've got a family, if you've got kids, it's quite likely you want a lawn for them to go and play on, isn't it? So if you go onto a garden, then you've got to pay the council for your garden waste. So I would imagine the net effect of the garden waste collection charge would impact negatively on families with children, I would suggest. So that's interesting. Right. So Mr. and Mrs. Trains Go By. This is not Trump bashing. Say stuff. Sorry, this is not Trump bashing. It's legit. I say stuff that could get me nicked for real, but I'm not stopping. Just want people to be aware the powers to do this already exist. Right. I don't entirely follow that. Maybe explain that a little bit more in a future one. Maybe they're encouraged us to burn it. Maybe for heat in the absence of adequate power generation. Well, the news today is this interconnector. So Scottish renewable electricity can be exported to England. So that's interesting. Yep. Yeah, only the key times for maximum effects. Outrageous. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Right, two-tier here. Right, let's get on to some of that. I've got a few stories to talk about. Now, these are some cases. I think people who were involved in the rioting on one side or another, their cases have been rushed through, and I think the sentences handed down have been especially harsh because they wanted to clamp down on this. My personal view is you shouldn't need to say, all right, we're in a panic, we've got a crisis, let's make the sentences extra tough to deter people. I'd have thought surely the sentences for this sort of behavior should be tough enough already. They shouldn't need to be particularly harsh. But have a look at these, see what you think. Right, that's the wrong fella. Let's try this one. Right, so what we've got here is a Dimitri Stoiker. And what he did is he went on TikTok and he faked being chased by far-right rioters. So he ran down the street claiming he was being chased by far-right rioters. Okay, right, what do you think of that? He was jailed for 3 months for attempting to stir up racial hatred. Now, was he trying to stir up racial hatred? I suspect he sort of was. I'm not sure it was racial, but he was trying to stir up hostility, certainly against the far right, or whatever that is. But he was sent to jail for 3 months. They'd probably only be there for a month and a half. But anyway, so sent to prison for making a fake video claiming he was being chased by people down the street. I find that quite difficult to get my head around. What do you think of that? I mean, does that seem reasonable? I mean, it's almost, I mean, it's not illegal to tell lies. It's illegal to lie in order to induce someone to do something. That's what fraud is. Could this be classed as some sort of fraud? Is he trying to induce some people to do something? He is trying to stir up hatred. That is correct. Should that be a crime in this sort of situation? Quite a tricky one. Quite a tricky one. Let's just carry on. See what else we've got about him. Yeah, his video was viewed by 700 people, and there's no evidence that it stirred up any violence or anything like that. His video was only watched by 700 people, and there he is. So I found that quite an intriguing story. But the one positive thing, I suppose, with that is at least the law was applied to someone on the side the government would, or the police would normally be trying to go very soft on, but they seem to have been treated quite harshly. Right, how about some of these? Right, this gentleman, Tyler James Kay. Right, so sentenced for 3 years and 2 months for stirring up racial hatred. 3 years and 2 months stirring up racial hatred. Let's have a look what he said. He put on X, mass deportation now, that's not the crime. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the... Right, now that's a crime, isn't it? You're probably with me there. That's incitement. That's incitement to murder, incitement to criminal damage, incitement to arson, or whatever. So there's a crime. There very definitely is a crime. But what was he sentenced for? Stirring up racial hatred. Now, I think the crime there is inciting violence, but he was sentenced for stirring up racial hatred. 3 years sentence. Was that right? Remind me? 3 years? Yeah, 3 years and 2 months sentence for saying that, which is incitement. So I'm not much for the stirring up hatred law, but that's incitement to violence. So I'm okay that is a crime. Quite interesting looking through these. Right, let's have a look who we've got next. Right, you might have seen this gentleman, Ricky Jones. He stood up in this rally of left-wingers, anti-racist so-called campaigners, and he said, we need to cut the throats of the disgusting, nasty fascists and get rid of them. So that's sort of incitement to murder, basically. Possibly statement of intent to murder or incitement to murder. So that seems a pretty serious crime. So let's see what happened to him. He has been arrested and he hasn't been charged yet, but we're expecting that he will be for inciting violence. So again, there's someone on the side you might think the police are quite lenient on, and it seems like so far there is going to be action taken against him. It's fascinating watching the video of him because he's there saying they should have their throats cut. And you see the lady with the microphone, you can see the other sort of left-wing protesters around them. No one intervenes. No one says, whoa, stop there. You can't say that. That they all just go with the flow. I think that's quite a, maybe it's a sort of lost art, but I think it's a really important characteristic to have some people there who are willing to say immediately, whoa, you can't say that. Apologize. You can't say that. We're not having that in our demonstration. But there's no one there. They all just go with the flow and carry on. Yeah, good point. Amnesty International workers applauding him. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Right. Let's see who we've got next. Right, this is where it gets really interesting. I think this lady here, Bernadette Spofford, this is just after the Southport murders. She put an X post and misidentified the Southport murderer as Ali al-Shakati. Just a week later, Chester police released a statement announcing her arrest. Right, so here's the tweet. So look what she says. She says, Southport, talking about the murders. If this is true, all hell is about to break loose. If it's true, then she says, Southport stabbing suspect Ali al-Shakati was on MI6 watch list, was known to Liverpool Mental Health Services. He was an asylum seeker who came to UK by boat last year. Right, all of that was not true. It wasn't true. But she starts off saying, if this is true. So she's heard it or read it. She's heard other people saying this, and she's repeating it, saying, if this is true, all hell's going to break loose. Which, is that incitement or is that an accurate prediction? You could debate that. So what happened with this? Well, she's been, again, prosecuted, stirring up racial hatred and false communications. Yeah, have we got a sentence there to say what the sentence was? I don't think we've got a sentence there. But she is being prosecuted. I think I'm right in saying, I thought it was in this tweet, that she is going to prison for this. But certainly prosecution is underway. What do you think about that? I don't really get that. I mean, is it really a crime to pass on something that you're not certain of, saying this might be true? So it's like passing on a rumor. So you're not allowed to pass on rumors on social media. Okay, that seems quite strange. I mean, should that be a crime? Just passing on a rumor that turns out not to be true? I mean, that's an interesting one. But then look at this gentleman. Right, Nick Knowles posted on X at the height of the riot. A Muslim woman's been attacked with acid in Middlesbrough. That was totally false. It was not true. And I guess he'd heard someone else say it and was just passing it on. He just assumed it was true and passed it on. So what's happening to him? So his case is very similar to the previous lady we looked at. Heard something that wasn't true, passed it on. The lady who passed it on, she said, if this is true, but this man didn't say that. He just said, this has happened. And yet the woman was arrested. The man has not been arrested. Now, what's the reason for that? People suggest, and I would be inclined to agree, it's because the woman was on the wrong side as far as the police were concerned, and the man was on the right side. The man is involved with Hope Not Hate, the extreme left-wing campaigning group that tries to present itself as something different. So I think that is some evidence of two-tier policing there, very definitely. Right, then how about this one? So at the bottom left, agony for mother of teen killed in machete attack after learning one of his killers will be released after just 6 months in prison due to overcrowding under the new Labour scheme. So a murderer released after 6 months. A murderer. Then on the right, Stephen Mallin, the first person to be sentenced in Teesside for his involvement in the violent disorder in Hartlepool on Wednesday. The judge jailed him for 26 months. The 53-year-old was constantly in the face of officers, gesticulating and shouting at them. So shouting and gesticulating at police officers, 26 months. So over 2 years, you probably only serve half of it. So you serve a year, say. Murder, 6 months. I mean, how can this possibly make sense? So the rioter, I mean, just to clarify, the rioter for whom I have no sympathy whatsoever, but is it right to sort of have like extra harsh sentences because it seems politically necessary or expediency? Surely the sentencing should be consistent and should already be at a level that's going to deter people at necessary. Right. Right, thank you. And adults talk like that. I appreciate that comment. I do feel with these issues, a lot of online discussion. I made some videos. You look at the comments. There's an awful lot of people that all they want to know is which side you're on, and then all they want to hear is things that bolster their side of the argument. And if you just say something that's a bit nuanced, or there's maybe a point here or whatever, let's have a think, then not interested in that. You're cast into outer darkness because you're not on their side quite unambiguously enough. It's very, very frustrating. Anyway, let's see what's next. This was interesting. With this two-tier policing idea, when the BBC refers to it, it says, calls it a conspiracy theory and says there's no evidence for it. Now, again, if that was from the other side, they would have regarded as perfectly adequate evidence. So anyway, yeah, so The Guardian says two-tier policing is a widespread myth. But on the right hand is the article saying basically the police are racist. They treat different people treat people differently according to their race. Now, people have pointed out quite perceptibly, hang on a minute, you can't have it both ways. You can't say two-tier policing, how dare you suggest such a thing? The police deal with everyone even-handedly, apart from that they favor white people and pick on black people. We all know that. So the people on the left of politics tend to think there's two-tier policing, and people on the right of politics tend to think there's two-tier policing as well. Which one's right? Well, I would say people on the left, if there's two-tier policing, like racists say, someone's treated less well because of their race, that's because you've got a rogue officer or two. And the systems will be in place to try and deal with that if there's a problem. But the two-tier policing that favors minority groups, shall we say, that's official policy. That's official policy. So in terms of political issues, it's the two-tier policing that favors minority groups and left-wing causes. That is official policy. That's more of a political issue. A racist police officer, systems are in place to deal with that. I mean, there's always going to be rogue people in any profession. Most issues are polarized with no middle ground. Absolutely. That is definitely the way they go. Now, we had a wildlife report last week as well, didn't we, Kirsty? A badger and a hedgehog in the garden. Very nice. We've got plenty of foxes around at the moment around our house. So now we've said this before, Mr. Scorpion. I mean, it's just not good enough. So we do urge you to make more of an effort. And I, as I keep saying, I am going to invite on people to talk about a very good book I read, History About Had Other Ideas. So yeah, wait for that. That will happen. Right. Is there another slide here? What else have we got? This again, when the school term is approaching, you tend to get quite a few education articles in the papers. And this was one from the Express. Jenny Gilruth humiliatingly snubbed by schools over her soft touch approach to discipline. Now, basically, some schools have been saying to the government and to inspectors, I assume, which is quite brave, they've been saying, look, we're not following your ridiculous restorative approaches guidance because it doesn't work. Disciplines fall into bits in our schools when we tried that. So we're ditching that and we're going back to a more conventional disciplinary system that involves, as they call them, consequences. They call them consequences because they don't want to say the P word, punishment. I mean, that's like so old-fashioned and unenlightened. No one dares, even the people who want punishments back, they daren't use that word. They've got to have another word, call them consequences. Now, my frustration with this is these restorative practices, they were introduced when I was teaching. And I remember at the school I was in, we went along to a training session on them. This would be a good 7 years ago, even 8 years ago, maybe. And I sat there the first time in the training session, sat listening to it and thought to myself, this is bunk. It's based on flawed philosophy. It's on the idea that people are basically good. If you're nice enough to kids, then they'll just be angels. Okay, there's some truth in that, but it is a long way from the whole truth. I wrote an essay on this, shared it with the school, shared it with the conservative education spokeswoman at the time. But basically, didn't have any impact on the national debate. Let's put it that way. And then it's played out, and this has been a disaster across Scotland. It's negatively affected thousands and thousands of children. And what I find frustrating is in the Scottish Parliament, even now they can maybe just about get to broaching the issue in a sort of oblique sort of way. And to be blunt, to be immodest for a moment, it just makes me think, please, can I be in the Parliament? So instead of taking like 8 years to realize this is a disaster, so I could just say at day one, this is not going to work, this is why, and just open up that debate. So please vote for us, vote for me, and give me the chance to do that. Police were actually walking along Princes Street yesterday. Yeah, it's not unknown to see a police officer in Edinburgh. It is quite rare. It's not entirely unknown. Right, I'm going to need how we do with my slides. I'll bring Gareth on in just a minute. So this was about a murder that took place. I mean, we're about a lot of murders at the moment, that took place about a year ago. And there was someone who had been dealt with by the NHS for mental health problems. And the suggestion is that the warning signs were there, they were recorded, but the person wasn't properly monitored or controlled and ended up committing murder. Now, the families say the NHS and the police have blood on their hands over the killings. Now, with every sympathy for these families, obviously, but what they're saying there is wrong. They're wrong. You can't say someone has blood. The person who's got blood on their hands is the murderer. People, the police or the NHS, no matter how their systems didn't operate properly, no matter what mistakes were made, it's wrong to say they've got blood on their hands. And I think they're sort of lashing out at basically lashing out at the people who might end up having to pay compensation rather than lashing out at the person who actually committed the crime. I think is an unsavory aspect of our contemporary society. I think what can tend to happen, it tends to be a left-leaning thing as well. Left-leaning people, they tend to take the view, individuals, well, they sort of couldn't help it. It's the organization, it's the system. That's the real problem. They're the people. That's the thing you've really got to blame. So it's partly that sort of ideology as well. So yeah, I understand they're in a very difficult time, but I would say the BBC shouldn't publish that headline because that is just totally unfair. Even if you're the mental health team in the NHS who's now thinking, okay, maybe we did make a mistake here, but that's how we've got that happen. To say they've got blood on their hands, no, that's not right. The other missing information with these sort of issues is, that's same way that when there's been child abuse, they'll say, oh, there's a concern was registered, and I think it said, this person could commit murder. Now, what I always need to know there, the additional information I always need to know is how many people are classified as capable of violent crime or murder because they've got a mental health problem. Now, it may be that there are like tens of thousands of people in that category who this risk is recorded, but only a tiny proportion of them, 0.1% or something, actually go on to commit such a crime. If that's the situation, it puts a completely different, they see it in a completely different light. But that information is often missing. So same with child abuse things. They'll say, that there was acknowledged that there was a risk of abuse. But how many people are acknowledged that there's a risk of abuse? And you need to know that statistical data in order to be able to judge how much of a mistake was made in failing to take action. Okay, right. We'll save Elon Musk and Humza Yousaf for later. There's a few things to say about that. That's quite a little story. But I think it is time to bring on Gareth. Welcome, Gareth.
Hello.
Right, Gareth is a deputy chairman of the Scottish Family Party. Gareth lives down in Biggar. No, Biggar's not the borders, is it? Is it?
It's like really close to the borders. It's on the edge of the borders. So Skirling, which is like couple of miles up the road is in the Borders, and we're just out. So we're South Lanarkshire, actually.
South Lanarkshire. Right. Very good.
But it's close enough. It's close enough.
Uh-huh.
I'm in the Borders most of the time.
Uh-huh. Right. So, Gareth, take us away. What have you come to talk about tonight?
Yes. So let me give you a bit of background. So I was obviously at the count for the election, given the fact that we put myself down as candidate, which was a great experience. I really enjoyed it, and it was really good. And a strange thing happened where someone came up to me, a teenager, teenagers, 16, and she came up and said, and asked me a couple of questions. And she was asking how I felt about same-sex relationships, and I could see, arguably, by the way she was dressed, she was in a same-sex relationship. And I thought to myself, which I was happy to respond to, but I really appreciated the fact that she came out and chatted to me, and she began to highlight some of the kind of like, obviously I'm really, I think about education, the RHSBC, so I really took the opportunity to ask a lot of questions and understand the background. And one of the things that was interesting in the conversation, she came up and she said, there's a growing tendency for misogyny, and in terms of boys or men hating women, in terms of she said in schools it's becoming unsafe for her. So she said she had received threats, and some of them were death threats, in terms of she felt very insecure. So it seemed significant, and she said this is a growing tendency. She can see it all around. So for this reason, she's now and what I gleaned from the conversation was, I asked questions like is it a once-off case, in your like to do with your school? Is it isolated? And said no, this is an online thing that's beginning to grow, and that's a real concern for me, because I'm obviously really concerned about that generation. You've already mentioned the discipline, right? There's lack of discipline. So when there's no discipline, and I know this from high school, a new authority arises, and it's within the pupils, and that's where it becomes really bad. And she mentioned a few things, and she even went on to. So I gave my email address, which you had it from the flyers, and so she sent through a bunch of emails and a bunch of links, and she highlighted Andrew Tate, saying that this ideology, this Andrew Tate, I don't know, could you call him an ideology? I'm not sure. This Andrew Tate kind of perception is in and around and coming through schools, and also mentioned incels. Yeah, there's a great one. So I did some research, and I was looking at Andrew Tate, and I'll post a link in the comments later. But let's just stick with Andrew Tate. And she was saying this is the kind of like thing that's coming, and just to ask a few questions. But yeah, before we jump to Andrew Tate, actually, so Richard, like from your schooling perspective, like from schooling, do you, so far what I've shared in terms of this idea of boys hating women, is that a new thing? Did you see that in your schools? Were there instances where that kind of thing happened, and was it in what light was that?
I taught at a boys' school, so some of these issues were not so apparent, I would say. I think certainly the Andrew Tate phenomenon is more recent. I think for a lot of educationalists, they sort of love Andrew Tate because he provides a nice binary for them. There's we the feminists who are the good people, and then there's Andrew Tate, who's clearly a bad person for various reasons. And I mean, to clarify with Andrew Tate, I mean, he does say things that are absolutely beyond the pale. But on the other hand, he also says a lot of things that you can see that young men would find quite appealing. So when people hear someone saying, oh, if you're feeling a bit miserable, I'm not interested in saying I'm depressed, I'm having a day off work, get down to the gym and be positive, get on with something, work hard and, man up. That sort of message. But that is so countercultural now. I mean, no teacher in Scotland would dare say anything like that to people. I mean, that could be career ending. So I think when boys in particular, when they hear that sort of thing, they relate to it. They think, "Oh, that's great at last." Someone just talking straight and being challenging. But I mean, Andrew Tate's business model basically is sort of as a pimp. enticing girls to work on sex lines. So, obviously totally off. His moral system is totally unrelated to our own. So quite concerning that way. But I think that's why the educational establishment love him, because it makes it a nice clear, we're the goodies, he's the baddie, look what we're up against. Whereas I believe what a lot of young people need, boys in particular, is something in between. So some of the positive qualities Andrew Tate's presenting, but without, in a more positive character, a more respectable character.
Yeah. And from my research, from what I saw, like I think from his business model, and he's got online course like how to pick up chicks, and he's got like on a moral fabric point of view, he's way on the left. I think he's just without boundaries in terms of from a moral fabric point of view.
But he says he's a Muslim now.
Oh right, well that makes sense.
How that fits with being a Muslim, I do not know. I'm not sure he knows either.
Yeah, I think the issue there is the possession of women, right? So he thinks women are there to be like how many can you collect like cars, I guess. And so that kind of makes sense. Whereas it's definitely not a Christian perspective in terms of so he would share some things which are quite interesting, but definitely like it does seem that he's like into this online, creating a men's group, which would be completely against the feminist thing. Like guys getting together, man's club, what? And so you can see the appeal. It's like Fight Club. There's like, hey, somebody who's talking my language, I don't like getting rejected. I'm gonna come here. I'm gonna, and so I can totally see the appeal from as you say, from that point of view. But it is without rails in terms of there are certain areas where he's just venturing off, I think, and it's so I can see the negative as well in terms of if you see a bunch of guys getting together, and I certainly saw this in my schooling day. So here's my theory. So this thing on incels, a bunch of guys, and I think it's the fire behind this thing is in my view online dating, pornography, this kind of like social expectation that we online date, we're there for one reason, and this pornography in terms of the expectation and the sexual kind of drive, and then you've got this kind of like pressure that girls are under, and guys expecting this whole kind of thing, and the next thing the guys don't get what they want. Let's just put it that way. And they get frustrated and annoyed by that, and then comes the incels in terms of like, oh come on, oh, I'm going to go on that online course on how to pick up chicks, Andrew Tate, so I'm going to meet them in the Andrew Tate. That's going to create that drive. But it's around this kind of like, what happened to the gentleman fabric? What happened to this idea of like friends, and I think schools have lost how to educate, how to, like, that was one thing you were mentioning in the boys' school, like in terms of you would have some kind of influence in terms of how to be a gentleman, how to be like how to behave. Did you
yeah.
Do you think
that's it's interesting with Andrew Tate? Andrew Tate will talk about he'll be with a girl and he will treat her like royalty. In terms of protecting her, and so we'll sort of have that side, but then there'll be a very distorted aspect to it as well. Just with the misogyny thing, I tend to think misogyny is the wrong word to use for this sort of movement. I don't think it's hatred of women. I think part of it is just plain and simple immorality. I mean, having a view of sexual morality, rather than sexual immorality, basically, of believing that using someone purely for sexual gratification, that's perfectly fine, and playing that game is perfectly acceptable. Now, the behavior that flows from that is very damaging to women, and it results in an attitude that's very, what's the word? Uncaring, just uncaring, heartless, whatever, towards women. So that flows from immorality. And it flows from a view of sexual relationships that, basically have sex with who you like, whenever you like, as long as you both feel like it. That's the one moral constraint. So that's at the heart of the issue. Now, where did that philosophy come from? Well, it came from the people who are complaining most vociferously about Andrew Tate. So I think they're reaping what they've sown. Basically, the other thing with boys as well. I mean, boys, can be badly behaved and can throw the weight around or whatever, and turning them into gentlemen, mold them into gentlemen, can require some pretty tough treatment. because boys can be pretty stubborn and tough, and they need pretty stern, clear guidance in order to grow up to be young gentlemen. And if that's not there, if the boys are just used to getting in their own way and throwing their weight around and speaking to people really disrespectfully, then if that's the way they're used to dealing with other pupils, with teachers, etc., then that same behavior is going to come out when they're dealing with girls as well. And then add in pornography as well. I mean, another research demonstrates as people use more and more pornography, one of the results is that they expect women and girls just to be ready to have sex at the drop of a hat. That's one of the results of pornography addiction. So add all those things together, then you're going to be bringing up an awful lot of boys who are going to treat girls very, very badly for a variety of reasons. And the solution to that isn't that we need more feminism. We need to we need to try and make the boys more feminine. That's what a lot of feminist activism in school amounts to. It's not that they need to start campaigning about the gender pay gap or whatever, and it's not that they need to just have some special respect for women, because they don't hate women. It's just that they treat boys just as badly. It's just that the context is different. They will maybe treat a boy just as badly in order to get something they want from the boy, and maybe more emotionally vulnerable in some cases as well. And the girls, in a sense, have got what the boys are after because they've got no sense of sexual morality. So they're just finding a girl to have sex with. So the inevitable consequence of that is there's a lot of boys treating a lot of girls very, very badly.
Yeah, and I think what that's proven in the fact that there is this greater, like I was reading in the article that she sent through, that as a result you're finding girls, and this could also be one of the reasons for the birth rate dropping, in terms of it's just this attitude is so so extreme that the girls are like, well, okay, I don't need a relationship. And they can just say, well, I'm single. That's there's just this lack of, for example, this perception of marriage. Like I think we've lost the ideal of being a family. Like when I ask my kids, what are you going to do when you grow up? And they say, well, I'm going to be a footballer, and I'm going to get married, and I'm going to have children, I'm going to own a dog, which just these perfectly sane things in my mind. But now I think, I'm going to have a career. Being married and having children is gone now. And I think that creates this wall. Well, then what else? Well, I'm going to have this girl and that one because that's what I want right now. And that creates a problem.
I mean, the system of that, the assumptions about sexual morality or propriety have completely changed to the detriment of girls, basically. But the system of marriage is that, basically, to put it bluntly, boys only get to have sex when they've committed publicly to a lifelong relationship with you and to be father for their children, etc. So in other words, that the institution of marriage pressurized boys into behaving the way that girls need them and want them to behave. But that's now taken away. So boys now are not pressurized to behave the way that girls actually want them to, that they're off the leash to behave in completely different ways. And obviously, inevitably, girls are the ones who suffer. I'm just going to take a slight interlude. I do not know why we attract sort of anti-Semites to this live stream. It's not, would you say most weeks? But it's just not unusual.
No, I didn't actually notice that.
Just firing in anti-Semitic comments. My attitude to people with really unsavory and unjustified views, I tend to be quite, I basically try to help them to see that what they're believing just isn't true and is dangerous, and invite them to reconsider. But it really does strain my patience getting people on coming with this. I mean, anti-Semitism is just a vulgar, horrible evil. So if you want to come and post this evil in the comments of our live stream, well, I don't know why you want to do that, but hopefully you can reconsider and look what anti-Semitism has led to in the past. And often people's there's different routes into anti-Semitism. One of them is getting into more and more conspiracy theories. There's someone controlling, someone's pulling the strings. Who is it? Who could it be? Who's got all the power? Oh, it's the Jews, control neutral. Now, I mean, maybe you've gone down that path, maybe, but I would invite you to reconsider the point that you've ended up at and where that's heading and where that would head for a society. I mean, you're making all these anti-Semitic comments, but what do you want them to lead to? I mean, let's say we did realize this. I mean, the things you're saying are not true, but if it was true, what are we supposed to do? What do you want us to do about the Jews?
Yeah.
You know, how about making that clear? Because it's probably pretty unsavory. So,
yeah.
Maybe next week someone else will come with
maybe it's planted. Maybe it's planted. Somebody deliberately trying to tarnish the stream.
Yeah. Right. How do I get rid of the comment? There it goes. Hide current comments. Right. Sorry, just a little interlude there to deal with that. So we were saying.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
I think to conclude in terms of, I think you're absolutely right. Marriage has been kicked out the window without the regard of the impact. And that is I think we are right. We're in a society that doesn't actually view marriage or value marriage. And therefore it's going to have, I think you also have I think also the fire under the pot right now is just the moral fabric of society as in general is wasted, and I think we need to get back into a place where that is rebuilt, and I think it happens in schools. I've seen ideologies completely change from my upbringing, where it was incredibly racist, and then the opposite in terms of very, so it can change in schools, and I think we need to bring back those values in schools, and I think Scottish Family Party are the right place and right people to do it. And I think we absolutely need to bring values back into schools.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. But just to say, do you think it would help aid my ability to communicate with young men if I got myself a flashy car?
Yeah, it would.
Right, okay.
I'll bring that up. I thought you did.
We'll discuss that at the leadership meeting next time. The thing with Andrew Tate, I was going to make a video. I know I did make a video about him. I was going to introduce it. I was going to go along to the Ferrari showroom around the other side of Edinburgh. I was going to stand in front of a row of Ferraris, put some sunglasses on, and I was going to impersonate Andrew Tate. And I was going to say, as if I'm answering questions from supporters, it would be, should you have Weetabix or cornflakes? And I was going to read it and say, Weetabix is for wimps. Real men don't eat Weetabix. What an embarrassment. What a loser you are. The proper crunchy cornflakes. That's what real men eat. That's what I eat. I've got that a lot of the time. That's the sort of thing he's saying. It's totally nonsense, but he says it with such passion and fervor that it's sort of quite entertaining. So I was going to do that, my little Andrew Tate impersonation, but my son said I wasn't allowed to. He said it would be too embarrassing, and no one will get it. Now we can take a vote on this. I mean, who thinks I should do that? Would that have been funny, or would that have been a total embarrassment?
Leave your comments and see. Give a thumbs up if you want.
There's a question there.
South African.
South African.
Yeah.
Richard Tate. Yeah. Muesli. Oh, that's. I'm not even talking to you.
Dry muesli. You'd have to eat it dry.
You've got to put a handful of gravel in it. Then you could be a real man. So. Right. Well, thank you very much, Gareth. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to hang around for the next bit? I've got some other things to talk about. Yeah, so do hang around. Now, what have we got next? We've got right. We need to go back a few slides. Right, here we go. Right, Elon Musk has been having an argument with Humza Yousaf. Now, again, I would say this every time. You're probably fed up of hearing me saying this, but I'll just remind you one more time. Humza Yousaf's white speech in the parliament. I found it and brought it to public attention, and it's now ended up as an international spat between Humza Yousaf and Elon Musk. So let's have a look at that. Yeah, so talking about that speech is white speech. An edited version of the lengthy speech was widely shared by right-wing accounts on social media, right? Starting with the Scottish Family Party. We're not right-wing, but anyway. So it's saying it was an edited version. And then Elon Musk called him a blatant racist. The fact check by the Reuters news agency concluded that the clip misrepresented Mr. Yousaf's comments by suggesting he'd been arguing that Scotland contained too many white people when he'd been complaining about racial injustice and a lack of people of colour in positions of power. And this drives me nuts when the BBC calls it fact checking, when actually it's just a subjective interpretation. Now, I say there's two reasons why Humza Yousaf's speech was racist. One was he was saying there's not enough non-white people in the top jobs and something needs doing about it. So we need to discriminate positively in order to get people who are not white in these top jobs. In other words, we need to discriminate against white people in the future when we're looking at these top jobs. So I think that's racist. But the other reason is just the way he said it. The way he said that they're white. I mean, the venom in his voice. I think that's another reason to come to that conclusion. But the BBC say they've fact-checked it. And their fact-checking division says that that's not true. I mean, how can anyone claim that that sort of subjective interpretation is something that can be fact-checked? I do not know. Anyway, so what have we got here? We've got some other... I mean, Elon Musk said the civil war is inevitable in the UK. I thought that was a really stupid thing to say. Irresponsible. And also, I think it'll be proved wrong in the relatively short term. So, yeah, it wasn't very... I agree with Elon Musk on a lot of things, but I didn't think that was very helpful at all. So Humza Yousaf called him one of the most dangerous men on the planet. Again, replying with an even-handed, temperate, well-thought-through, moderate comment. And so I think Humza Yousaf implied that he might sue Elon Musk for saying he was a racist. Elon Musk replied, "I dare that scumbag to sue me. Go ahead and make my day." I guess if Humza Yousaf were to sue Elon Musk, that would have to be in America. But you can't sue someone in Scotland for something they typed into their computer in America, can you? I assume. But then Elon Musk said this is the intriguing bit. He said, legal discovery will show that however big a racist he's been in public communications, he is vastly worse in private communications. Now, in other words, Elon Musk is saying that he's got some information, some private communications that strengthen his case that Humza Yousaf is racist. Now, that's quite interesting, isn't it? I wonder what they could be. Now, it obviously raises the question, how could Elon Musk have got these documents? Well, I think it's quite easy to know how he got them. Because anyone who had anything like that, who you send it to? You send it to Elon Musk. Why did you send it to Elon Musk? Well, partly because he's a major figure involved in this spat. And partly you might think, maybe there'll be a bit of a kickback as well. It might reimburse your expenses for sending over some things by email. So that could be interesting to see how that plays out in the weeks to come. I just keep thinking, though, I'm so glad Humza Yousaf is not the first minister anymore, because he would have been inflaming the situation like no one else. You think Keir Starmer's bad if Humza Yousaf had been first minister? I'm sure there would have been rioting on the streets in Scotland. I'm sure he would have been able to provoke that. So, had you followed that story at all?
Yeah, no, not so much. I did see a little bit about what Elon Musk was doing. That there were some Twitter communication between. I didn't realize it went beyond that. But I absolutely concur. It was up just much better timing. I still think maybe we could have reacted more moderately as well in the UK. I think we maybe overreacted as well. Even then, even Keir Starmer overreacted. So I think
the inconsistency is when there've been big riots before, they've generally been followed by you set up a committee or a commission or something to investigate the frustrations that have led to it. But that's the normal thing, and you'd have that sort of language right from the early stages as well. But you will not get Keir Starmer to say, "I completely condemn these riots, but we need to try and investigate the issues behind them." Now, I can understand why people don't want to do that, because it sounds like you're giving people an excuse. But okay, whatever you think about that, you're just going to be consistent, because when it's been other, gangs smashing the place up, it is okay, regarded as okay, to say, well, let's look at what the frustrations are. Let's see if we can deal with any of these issues. So,
Yeah.
sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander.
Yeah, that's what happened to the London riots, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they were across the country, weren't they? And, I can remember back in when I was at university around that time, there were some riots in in Birmingham, where I was. It was, minority areas, minority ethnic areas, or majority ethnic minority areas. You know what I mean? And there was some writing there, but again, the response was always, what can we do to build better relationships with the community? I don't think anyone in the police is going to be saying, what can we do to build better relationships with the anti-mass immigration community?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Right, Elon Musk retweeted this. I guess normally Elon Musk, I agree with him, but I think he is unwise and he shoots from the hip. I mean, the Brits gave up their guns, and now the government puts them in jail for Facebook posts. Well, puts you in jail for Facebook posts. Well, that's not quite telling the whole story. So if Brits did have guns, what? So the police will come and arrest you for a Facebook post. Then what? You shoot them? Or I'm not quite sure what is got in mind there. Or it should be violent. Is this the civil war he's talking about? I think what Elon Musk's doing is he's giving an awful lot of ammunition for the people who would like to shut down X in Britain or in the EU. He's giving them an awful lot of ammunition. Because people are able to say, look, this fella is inciting, civil war. He's inciting civil war. He's inviting armed struggle against the government. We can't have this, can we? That's illegal. So he's playing into their hands, and he's giving ammunition to people who would love to see X banned in Britain. Now, personally, I think the freedom of speech on X is great. And I think what Elon Musk has done with it overall is very good. But I think he's not helping his cause with this sort of thing. Well, I say it's very good. I said this last week. Did you use X, Gareth?
Carefully. I think for this exact reason, right? So it's like you could say the wrong thing and find yourself in jail. It just feels so. I think just everything can be so overreacted to and
febrile. That's the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Volatile.
Volatile. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd like to use it more, and I'm intending to do more, but I think live streaming where you can give more context, but even that, as you know, can open up.
Yeah.
But
I was saying last week, I think, on X, you can pick for you or following. So following, that's the people you follow on X, and you'll see what they've been posting. If you click for you, that's what their algorithm thinks you're going to be interested in. And I find the for you one, it's pretty wild what you get. During the riots, it was just like Tommy Robinson all the time. I think at one point I actually clicked to block him, or not interested, but it still kept putting it up. And that's quite interesting. And I think sometimes with X, when you log in, it automatically goes to for you. Now that's a lot of power in the hands of a company, isn't it? When you've got people, isn't it 1 billion people around the world? So they log in, and you automatically, without asking them, you're saying, instead of showing you content from the people you follow, we're going to show you the content that we want. And the first time I noticed it, as I said, was after Donald Trump's assassination attempt. I mean, my X feed was just full with wild American speculations, just total, really extreme nonsense. But it was just full of it, absolutely full of it. So is that a valid case for a government to say, we're concerned about this, about the effect of this? If you're it's not just amplifying. Yeah, it is amplifying. Yeah. So it's presenting material that's often untrue to people who haven't even shown any interest in that sort of material.
It's a lot of influence. The question I have is, would he deliberately do that to influence something? And I wouldn't be too surprised if the answer is yes.
So the thing is, his personal output shows that he feels very strongly about these issues. And as far as I can tell, what comes up on X if I click for you, or if it goes to for you, what comes up is very much in line with Elon Musk's sort of way of viewing the world, very distinctly. So I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes there, but they're very interesting questions. And we're almost right. This is a very sad story. I was really disappointed to read this. This is the Cedars school, which is in Greenock, if I remember rightly. Christian school. I think it was primary and secondary. I think they had about 80 pupils, capacity for maybe about 100. There are small Christian schools dotted around Scotland. There's new ones starting. Cedars School, I would say, in terms of these small Christian schools, is one of the bigger ones, and seemed to me to be quite professional. Its look was more a conventional independent school, smart uniforms, a nice building. I mean, it really seemed, I've met some of the people there. It really seemed great, but they folded. It's closed. I think partly because of just recruitment problems. They couldn't quite get the numbers they needed. But the other big factor is Labour Party putting VAT on school fees. So that's been the final blow to shut them down. This is what people said would happen to independent schools. Now, some people might not have too much sympathy for a £45,000 a year boarding school. I think maybe they should have some sympathy for them, because educated people of a higher standard is a good to society. It saves the state money as well. But the ones who will be hit most, I think, by this VAT on school fees will be small schools. There's Christian schools, there's a couple of Muslim schools, other ones as well, where they exist not because people are like super wealthy and they want to spend their way to better education. It's because they want a different ethos than in the mainstream schools. That's the motivation. And that's going to be made a lot more difficult, significantly more difficult, by the Labour Party's policy. I would imagine what's behind it is partly the politics of envy. They want to have a go at the schools where people with lots of money send their kids to. And also, it's the idea that the state knows best. And if we're going to have equality, if we're going to bring up proper citizens who really know what British values are, in other words, the Labour Party's values, then we need, or the SNPs, we need to have them all in school hearing our message. So that's biting already. So that was very disappointing.
Yeah. Right.
There's a couple of things to finish off. This appalling stabbing in London. Was that earlier on today?
Oh.
A Romanian citizen. And I think with a terrible murder like that, the actual event, there's not much to say. Everyone knows that that's beyond the pale, utterly appalling evil, and has every sympathy for the victim and their family, and every regard for the people who intervened heroically and dealt with the attacker. And the police again dealing with him as well. So that's all straightforward. There's not any controversy about that. The interesting issue there is it says, GB News Naked, it says a Romanian citizen. Now, I think when I hear the news here about crimes, I think it seems to be that a disproportionate number of serious crimes are committed by people who are some type of immigrant or some different nationality, different national background. It seems to me that there's a disproportionate number of people in that situation. Now, I'd imagine it seems to a lot of other people that that's the case as well. But my frustration I wanted to say about here is that police refuse to publish statistics about people who commit crimes. When apparently some MPs have tried to get the statistics, and the police just say, we don't keep them. It'd be too expensive to gather them. And then people have said, well, we'll pay. Tell us what the bill is. We'll pay the bill. Then you give us the statistics. And the police, they will not give them. Now, when it comes to other aspects of policing, like who gets stopped and searched, or this sort of thing, then you get it's broken down by race, everything, national identity, right, religion, the whole lot. When it comes to who commits crimes, in Britain, there's a deliberate policy decision to not record the data about who commits crimes, what people from which groups commit crimes. Now, I just think that's not right. Now, I know what they're thinking. They're thinking the danger is if we produce the statistics and it shows that various immigrant groups, minority groups commit a disproportionately high amount of crime, that's going to stir up racist, anti-immigrant, far right. It's going to stir up that sort of feeling. But I think it's worse by leaving people in the dark. I think it's better. We're better to publish statistics. Then, when you're talking about immigration and you're trying to solve crime problems, it can be a bit more targeted. The discussion can be a bit more targeted and informed. I think that's really important information. I mean, for example, if you've got a single young man who comes as an illegal immigrant, I think he's got a pretty tough life ahead. He's going to be struggling to make ends meet. I talked about this last week. Things are pretty challenging, and it hasn't got his usual social support. So he'll be quite vulnerable, I would imagine, to potentially starting to take drugs, to mental health problems, to getting in with the wrong crowd. I mean, the fact that he's here as an illegal immigrant in the first place shows he's willing to break the law. So I think there are various factors that would make someone like that more likely to commit crimes. I think that just makes sense. But in Britain, we, as a nation, one way or another, it's as though we've decided we are not willing to look at those issues and actually think that we work out what's happening.
You think that would help inform policy, right? So somebody would share that information, and people go and say, right, well, let's find a way of vetting people more, or ensuring that there's enough jobs, or like ensuring that there's translations done so they can find job centers or whatever. In terms of, if there's a problem, I'm sure there's a solution. So let's rather discuss the problem. I think this is what you're trying to say, is let's put it on the table, and then we can collaboratively work together to find the right solution, rather than just choose not to discuss it at all. Because people might not be then know how that there is a problem, and B, how to solve it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a minor part of the solution might be to look at immigration policy and say we've got a major problem with criminal activity among people from a certain nation. Maybe there's organized crime going on among a particular immigrant community. So knowing that sort of thing is really important. But then the more important thing would be just to see what factors in people's lives might be leading to criminal behavior. And again, I think it would diffuse the far right, if the word means anything. But people who want to turn on immigrants with a hostility, I don't think that would make it worse. I think it would help, because currently I think a lot of people are like me who are thinking, well, I'm thinking it really seems that way to me. There's disproportion. That's what I'm thinking. A lot of other people are thinking, particularly if they're fed by social media feeds that just give them bad news story after bad news story. So they're feeling that, this is a really, really bad problem, but maybe they've got an exaggerated view of it. Even. Yeah,
it could be that. No, sorry, I was going to say it could be that the social media are only picking up where there are international. There's a whole massive amount of terrible crimes that are happening by local, people, non-internationals that you don't see. So that's a wonderful. That's like really good point in terms of there's only one answer for this question, which is look at the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So that was those are the
ones, right?
Three things we discussed. Yeah.
We have reached the end of the slides. The stabbing in Leicester Square. Or was it yesterday? Yes. Stabbing in Leicester Square. Yesterday. Sorry, I was just mixed up a little bit there. America still records the race, etc. of criminals. People who watch the media have no idea who commits far and away more crime than any other. Correct. The one data set we do seem to have is prison population by race. I was looking at that last week, and there was pretty disproportionate in some ways. And again, I think with generally the left-wing philosophy is crime within a community, within a particular section of society, is seen as a problem to try to tackle, to try and get to the root causes, tackle the tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. But it feels like when it comes to crime in different communities like this, then this stuff on the cause of the crime goes out the window, because you can't try and focus in and try and understand exactly what is going on. So, right. I assume I'm assuming you were listening at the beginning, and that's a joke. I would imagine. I hope. Right. On that note, we will conclude. The live stream next week will be on. I think we've got a special guest next week as well. So do tune in at 9 o'clock on Tuesday next week. Well, thanks for all of your comments. Thanks for watching. Those of you watching later as well. Gareth, thanks for joining us. That was very interesting.
Thanks for having me.
Right. See you next week. Right, good night.